hitchhike. I am going to get home to my son.
Ah! Yes! Where are you, you little creep? I'm gonna kill that kid! Why'd you take your shoes off?
Why do you dress like a chicken?
Gus Polinski, polka king of the Midwest. If you have to get to Chicago, we'll gladly drive you.
Hey, guys.
Yesterday, he was just a kid. But tonight, he's a home security system.
You guys give up, or you're thirsty for more?
From John Hughes.
You know, I got a feeling this is going to be your best Christmas ever.
A family comedy without the family. Home Alone.
Are you here all alone?
I'm 8 years old. You think I'd be here alone? I don't think so.
And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday evening here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Now, often the movie On This Days, because I am sort of, well, I can just say it, I'm a bit of a savant. I already know that on this day that A Clockwork Orange opened in New York City, or on that day, Dirty Harry opened in San Francisco. Well, today is a pretty significant On This Day, not just for Gen Xers, although this is one of our movies, but this is one of everyone's movies. On this day, 1990, saw the release of, I hate the names, can't get over it, Chris Columbus. I've never been able to get over the fact that he graduated NYU. Same graduating class as Spike Lee and Jim Jarmusch. A graduate film, not undergraduate. I think it was, what was it, the class of 82, 83? But on this day, 1990, what I believe to be the single best Christmas movie ever made, Home Alone, opened in theaters. And for someone such as myself, a kind of mid-range Generation Xer, it was a good time at the movies. There were a lot of big films in theaters in the final third of 1990. Yeah, final third. I was going to say final quarter. No, final third. A lot of bombs. Clint Eastwood, The Rookie with Charlie Sheen, that was the kind of end of the first iteration Clint Eastwood proper. And then he went underground for not very long and returned with Unforgiven. Bonfire of the Vanities, as I've talked about on the channel, I'll probably have to do another episode on how insane that was. Bonfire of the Vanities, in production the same time almost as Martin Scorsese's Goodfellas. And the Warner Brothers executives got those backwards. They thought Bonfire was going to be the Oscar contender when they screened Brian De Palma's Rough Cut. And they thought that Scorsese had wasted all of their money with Goodfellas. Marty, what the fuck did you do? You made a movie with no likable characters. What the fuck, man? Oops. They got those wrong. But that's baseball, Susan, and that's Hollywood. Every once in a while, though, even back in the Stone Ages, the pre-internet era of 1990, you will have a film that goes through the production process that all the performers hit their marks. And when I say performers, I don't mean actors. I mean everyone involved with the production does exactly what they're supposed to do. There were changes and are changes made to the script. They soften this character. They sharpen that up. And buzz builds that this film is going to be a success. And it ends up actually being a success. In the case of Home Alone, it ended up way exceeding expectations because it's not easy to know what's going to play, because we have seen great movies aimed at a family audience, such as The Iron Giant, 8 years after Home Alone. It just doesn't find the audience until later. And in the Christmas season, the holiday season of 1990, you had movies like Goodfellas. It's not really necessarily the same audience that's going to go to see Home Alone, or you'll certainly get some overlapping. My dad saw both of those movies in theaters. We'll get to that. But you also had Arnold in Kindergarten Cop. That everyone knew was going to be a big hit. I'm sure there were prognosticators, and maybe you could Google this. It's easier to Google stuff that took place once the internet era really took hold. But I'm pretty sure that there were people who would have expected Kindergarten Cop to be the biggest hit of that particular movie season and not Home Alone. But then again, there were people who thought By Far the Vanities was going to be a huge hit. They figured Clint Eastwood going back to his roots, the cop thriller with The Rookie, that should be, the problem with The Rookie is just not that good. Great cast. Raul Julia, the late great Raul Julia, Sonia Braga, and Clint and Charlie. Just wasn't that good. Now, I'm as big a Clint fan as there is, but no. It's bottom 5 worst films that Clint ever made. I hate to say it. Entertaining though it might be to see he and Charlie butting heads. But Home Alone it hit immediately. And I remember seeing the preview, and it looked okay. But if you had asked 16 going on 17-year-old me, as I was, do you think this is going to be a huge hit? No, it should make money. Three Men and a Little Lady was another film that was expected to do huge business because the first one had been a big success and also had been a very good movie. The sequel, not so good. It did okay, but it didn't do great. Now, Warner Brothers I don't think Warner Brothers was involved in the production of Home Alone. I think that it was Paramount. Warner might have had a hand in it. The reason why I even brought that up is because they were the ones that produced Goodfellas and Bonfire of the Vanities. And I don't know if it was Paramount, but Macaulay Culkin, the star of Home Alone, and I mentioned this on a recent podcast episode, but for those who missed the Jacob's Ladder anniversary episode, Macaulay Culkin plays a key supporting role in Jacob's Ladder, a movie that was in production before Home Alone. Significantly before, at least I would say 3 or 4 months. If you look at it, Macaulay Culkin looks significantly younger in Jacob's Ladder than in Home Alone, even though the films were released not much more than a couple of weeks apart. That's the way that it goes. You never know what's shooting and how long is the post-production schedule and all these kinds of things. But Macaulay had a big supporting role, and when I say big, meaning pivotal. He doesn't have a ton of screen time. He goes unbilled in in Jacob's Ladder. You watch the movie, and hey, look, it's Macaulay Culkin, and normally you're not going to be paying attention to the credits and say, hey, he's not in the credits. He's not in the credits. This was a calculated decision that was made by the studio. Presumably they wanted his name not in the public consciousness because he's 7, 8 years old. They just wanted Home Alone to sink or swim on its own merits. And you do see this occasionally where, is this a good time for this to come out? There are people in Hollywood to this day that will swear that Norbit being released when it was cost Eddie Murphy the supporting actor Oscar for Dreamgirls. So I almost said Golden Girls. Great. It certainly wasn't Showgirls. But timing can be everything. And a decision not to bill Macaulay in Jacob's Ladder, to de-emphasize his role in the film during the build-up, because Jacob's Ladder was heavily promoted. They're going for the Halloween crowd and the horror movie, a little bit of counter-programming as it turns into award season and the big Christmas movie season. But Home Alone landed in theaters, and I remember being shocked at how big of a hit it was. Rocky V with Stallone. That was another one nobody knew. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? It's bad. It's bad enough that's the only Rocky film that Sly, and this isn't really much news, he feels like he just never quite got a handle on what he wanted to do because he filmed a lot of footage. He filmed at least 6 weeks with Rocky even slower and presumably more brain damage from the terrible beatings that he had taken, and especially the fight with Drago. And Stallone actually stopped filming and reset. And that is something that, Woody Allen did it when he made, I think it was the movie September, but that is not something that's done in big budget filmmaking. Somebody like Woody who shoots low budget and most of the actors are only getting paid scale. Not that the studio or the independents would be happy, but you're more likely to be okay with that than Sly burning through $10 or $15 million and saying, I got to reset, I fucked up. But that's what happened. But Rocky V was one of the many disappointments of that season, while you had the awards contenders, Jeremy Irons winning Best Actor for Reversal of Fortune, and just a lot of really terrific films in theaters at the same time. And the week that Home Alone opened, I believe The Kindergarten Cop was second. Not 100% on this. And I know Goodfellas was in the top 10, but Goodfellas had a bit of a scattered release. and I'm not remembering offhand if it had a full blanket release. I'm not sure on that one. But you had a lot of big movies battling out for fannies in seats, and Home Alone hit, and the reviews were good. They weren't stupendous, and I feel like this is a movie that it has grown in appreciation with history. I hate to say it, as the culture has grown even more and more coarse in the last 34 years. That's coarse, C-O-A-R-S-E. The irony is there were people like the famous judge who was almost on the Supreme Court named Robert Bork. He thought the culture had already coarsened to a point of no return in 1990. Hello, as Mike Myers would say, hello, come on. But it just goes to show you, perspective is everything. You had people thinking that they were ahead of the curve in making bold proclamations like that, and they had no idea what everyone was in for. Everything became heightened. And as far as Home Alone, there were people who objected to the nastiness of the film. But I don't really see the movie. Yeah, there's nasty bits. But you really took the Wet Bandit seriously? W-E-T. The film, the primary, secondary, tertiary purpose is to entertain, and it succeeds brilliantly. And I feel like people watching it for the first time now, like you go on YouTube, a lot of the movie reviewers, I think some of them are full of shit, quite frankly, but people seeing it now for the first time, or let's just say I haven't seen it since I was a kid kind of thing, are all walking away saying this is phenomenal. Now, a lot of critics had issues with, this is just dumb, but they had issues with how cruel Kevin McCalister was to the motherfuckers who were trying to kill him. Really? This is where we're going? Yes. Newsday really liked the film, but they took issue with the way that Macaulay's character dispenses his Charles Bronson level vigilante justice. You know what? Oh, fuck yourselves. I would have been okay if he had ended their lives. They broke into his house. He's trying to defend his home, 8 years old though he might be. Fuck him. Come on. But Home Alone was this runaway hit, and it was a movie that got incredible word of mouth on top of the fact that, so it's like economics, the multiplier accelerator working in the film's favor. And remember, there are certain movies that have a built-in audience, whether it's IP like comic book movies. This had nothing. There's no prior identification. The biggest name in the cast was John Candy, and John Candy's role is a cameo. He did it as a favor to his old buddy, John Hughes. He had just worked with on Uncle Buck, and John Hughes is one of the producers of Home Alone. I guess I'm kind of glad that he didn't direct Home Alone, because not that he would have messed it up, but Chris Columbus, as a young up-and-coming filmmaker, Hughes was very canny. He was a guy who left the movie business. He wasn't very old. His last film, I think, was 1991. But he knew that Columbus was the right guy for this project. And his timing, his sense of pace, and also the film is gorgeous. It is an incredibly beautiful film to look at from the cinematographic perspective. The movie to me gets everything right. Now, we go back to the Christmas season of 1990, and yours truly is 16 going on 17. I would turn 17 on December 29th, 1990. I was gearing up for the Christmas season, which meant that the Massapequa High School a cappella choir, we were going to go on tour. We were going to spend 3 days on a bus traveling from location to location on Long Island, singing for at a reform school and a foster home and nursing homes and things like that. And when you're on a bus for hours at a time, you talk about what you're up to. And we were talking about Home Alone, which had been out probably for 3 or 4 weeks. And I believe the movie made 100 million or just under 100 in the first 4 weeks, which again, that would be a good gross for today. But for back then, through the roof. And Home Alone ended up with a worldwide box office take of $476.5 million. Time value of money, inflation, you calculate, you're looking at $1 billion plus if it's released today. And I feel like given the aggressiveness of TikTok, shorts, and social media, and the way everything is even more, well, way more connected than it was, I think that would have been to the movie's benefit, that it would have done even better at the box office than it did. And my father was a huge movie fan, the C in SCF, and called biggest movie fan I ever knew. Didn't know quite as much trivia as I did. He remembered a lot, but he didn't read books on movies the way I did. He was just somebody who loved movies and happened to have a great memory. He was not quite at the savant level that I was, but he also was not somebody who would seek out a movie that often and say, I've got to see it. Goodfellas was a film that had been on his radar. He didn't read the book, but he'd heard some people at the office talking about it, and it piqued his interest. And in the New York Magazine review, which came out a week to 10 days before the film opened in theaters, David Denby, my second favorite critic behind Roger Ebert, he was a great critic. A bit of a crank, but a fantastic film critic. But Dad was excited for Goodfellas, and he saw that, he saw that with his lady friend of the time in theaters. But Home Alone, enough people, again, in the office told him, you have to see this. Al, it's not just for kids. This is just a terrific film, and it is funny. The humor is not for children in the overwhelming majority. Like, this is a film, it's a little bit like what they did, what Rowling did in the early Harry Potter books, where she's telling a story for kids, but she's keeping the adults engaged. I thought that the Shrek series did that pretty well. So my dad, on its opening weekend, wanted to take me to see Home Alone. My sister was in. Jessica was really excited. Jess would have been 7 at the time. I didn't want to go. I'd had an opportunity, multiple opportunities to see Goodfellas a couple of weeks prior. Didn't want to see that either. Had a chance to see Jacob's Ladder in theaters. Didn't want to see that either. Woe is me. The king of complaining. Me, age 16, going on 17. Always complaining. I had nothing to do, but I didn't want to see those 3 movies, which are, in different ways, all-timers. But Dad and Jess, my dad and my sister, went to see Home Alone. And Dad was living in Woodbury at the time. That's where I was, I used to go on weekends, what you would expect. And they came home from the movies, and they were still giddy from seeing the film. Now, my father is not a giddy kind of a guy. Dear old Dad, Alan Philip Cohen, was already 48. He was still very, very serious. Still very much in his prime as a CPA. Still in his 40s. He had another 20 plus years to go. He had 22 years working more or less full time. But he came home and he was red-faced because I think that he and my sister had been laughing in the car on the way home. And they came up, and I was excited to see them. I watched some nonsense on Cinemax. I think I watched Bad Influence starring Rob Lowe. I think that was the entertainment for the night. So they came in, and they were really, really happy. And Dad said, and not in a bad way, because he could have been upset with me, but he and Jess had just had a great time. They had popcorn, they had nonpareils. It was like a classic time at the movies, a father and his kids. I was supposed to be there, but I just punked out. And he just said, Jerry, you should have come with us. The movie was great. Did you think you weren't going to like it? Jess, what did you say? Jerry, this is maybe the funniest movie I've ever seen. And she's laughing as she's telling me this. So my dad, who didn't like to spoil anything, he was very good at tight-lipped. He said, look, maybe you won't get to see the movie in theaters, but I'll tell you. And as he's thinking about it, he starts laughing again. He said, there's a moment in this film, it might be the funniest 30 seconds I've ever seen, and the audience went crazy. I said, well, what was it? She said, I'm not going to spoil it. My sister says, yeah, I'm not spoiling it either, but I'll tell you, it has something to do with pizza delivery, and that's it. Pizza delivery? What? I didn't see Home Alone until it hit home video. And I rented it immediately. I had, loser's lament, seller's remorse, whatever you want to call it. The fact that I hadn't seen it, and then didn't see it even as it was tearing up the box office. But when I watched the movie, and I was into it, I expected to like it. I didn't know anybody who didn't really like this movie. Although its existence as a Christmas film, it was Christmas season, but I don't remember anybody saying, oh, this is going to be the new Christmas standard. This is going to be like Bob Clark's A Christmas Story. This is going to be Miracle on 34th Street. It's a Wonderful Life. That didn't happen until a little bit later in the 90s. Probably by the mid-90s, people saying, hey, this is a perfect, not really wholesome, somewhat wholesome. It's wholesome in terms of how it wraps up. But this is a perfect family-friendly, to a large extent, holiday movie that does have the Christmas spirit. And there's shots in churches. Like, this is not an accident. This is a movie that actually paints a wholesome portrait of prayer and belief. You know, the old man, the Roberts Blossom character, like it's all really great stuff. But when I finally saw the movie, and we get to the part with the pizza delivery boy, and I start to get the idea of where it's going. But when the old man in the Angels with Dirty Faces, or whatever the heck that movie was supposed to be, I thought it was a real movie. I'm going to pump your guts full of lead. 1, 2, 10. When the pizza delivery guy goes scattering and staggering and stumbling. I'm all alone. I'm home alone in my dad's apartment in Woodbury. There's no one around. And I am screaming with laughter. Because even though I had been prepped, when the scene started, it didn't land for me. It didn't click what I was about to watch. And then it hit like a ton of bricks. I rewound it, watched it again. I rewound it and watched it again at least 10 times, and I was still screaming. Now, here's a tangent of the previous time that I had laughed that hard while watching a movie. Believe it or not, John Schlesinger's 1976 masterpiece thriller adaptation of William Goldman's novel Marathon Man had, up until this point, the single most intense, sustained laughter that I had ever experienced watching a movie on video where I could just keep rewinding it. And in that movie, unlike Pump Your Guts Full of Lead, 1, 2, 10. In the movie Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman comes home from a run. Marathon Man comes home from a run, and he has these guys that live in his building. Melendez, I forgot the other guy's name, and there's a whole bunch of them, and they're like bench jockeying, they're fucking with him, they don't like him, they call him Creepy, the Creep, because they think he's a weirdo. He's just a grad student, he's not really that weird. But he comes home from a run, and they're screaming, creepy, 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 and Dustin is checking his watch, and he has the stopwatch to figure out how was his time. And the kind of ringleader, Melendez, of this gang of guys who don't like Dustin Hoffman's Thomas Babington Levy, sees him with the stopwatch. And the guy shouts out, "You're going to time yourself in a shower?" And while he's screaming, "Are you going to time yourself in a shower?" he's going like this. I was in Florida. And when I realized what he was doing and why he screamed, "You're going to time yourself in the shower," I let out a scream. And then I screamed with laughter. I was so loud, I woke my grandfather up. It had to be 1 a.m. Grandpa was not happy. He was not happy. But that's how rare it was to have that kind of reaction. Now, in case of Marathon Man, that's not a funny movie. That's just that one moment that hit me. Home Alone has laughs throughout. Even when things take a bit of a darker turn, the big laughs are never far away. This is a movie that's sole purpose is to make you laugh and hopefully feel good and have a little bit of forgiveness in your heart. And the thing is, Kevin McCalister is a very poorly behaved kid as the film opens. He appears to be helpless, well, as he should be. He's 8 years old. He's not exactly about to split the atom and take the family on a road trip with himself driving. This isn't Chuck Norris. Kevin McCalister did not drive his mom to the hospital the day he was born in a hospital that he built. This is just a regular kid. He doesn't behave well, but if we're being fair, Catherine O'Hara, as the mom, she overreacts. She does not handle that situation the way that she should have. And so when we get to the end, spoiler alert, it doesn't feel like a cheat, because there have been movies where the lump in the throat doesn't feel like it's earned. Catherine O'Hara's end boss. She's also practically a cheat code. She's so good. But the moment in this movie where she says, "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," it works. It's believable. It's believable that she is going to chase all around the globe and back home, not just because she feels guilty for the way she treated her son. And, you get karma. Well, that's why all this happened. The kid got left home because he acted like a dick. And you know what? Mom and dad didn't really cover themselves in glory the way they handled their 8-year-old son. They really shouldn't have acted the way that they did. Well, here we are. But the happy ending, the lump in the throat, and the feeling of catharsis, it's earned. And you want to also talk about somebody clicking on all cylinders, somebody who is having an incredible season at the movies, Joe Pesci. Now, Joe Pesci, I'm pretty certain, filmed Goodfellas sometime before Home Alone. And Goodfellas was a long post-production. Not surprisingly, when you have a movie set in 3 different time periods, and it's Martin Scorsese, the editing process is going to take a while. In the case of Scorsese's 2 films later, The Age of Innocence was supposed to come out in 92. Took Marty an extra year to edit it because originally he thought it was going to be a much longer film. Shit happens, right? It's Hollywood. But Joe Pesci is fantastic in Home Alone. And you think of him, such a fearsome, intimidating character, despite the fact that Joe Pesci doesn't look like an intimidating guy. Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas compared to Marv, it's really incredible. And it's one reason why you want to talk about a guy who is uber talented. Joe Pesci won the Oscar for Goodfellas. Both of those movies are in theaters. You want to see a masterclass in film acting, how to compose oneself in front of the camera, how to play to the camera in a funny way in one movie, and in a purely scary, intimidating way in another. It's Joe Pesci. And Daniel Stern is a riot, obviously. He's fantastic. And really the whole cast, the late John Hurt as the father, he doesn't really have nearly as much to do. We didn't forget him. We just miscounted. But he was terrific, of course, in Big 2 years earlier with Tom Hanks as kind of like the antagonist, even though he's not really an antagonist, he's just an asshole. Sometimes you can just be an asshole. You're not really the antagonist of the film. But Home Alone is, to me, a great film. Not just a great comedy, not just a great family film or a great Christmas film. This is a movie that plays year-round. But yes, I always watch it come holiday season. And not just for what it is as far as celluloid, 24 frames per second. But for me personally, the time when it was released was a bad time for me. It didn't need to be, but it was. And yet, when I think back on those halcyon days, they have a bit of a golden hue because I'm still here. I'm here 34 years later. And I don't regret. I mean, I wish I had seen it, but it's okay that I didn't because I caught up. I caught up with everybody else, and everybody else who kept telling me to see it, they were right. And the people who had urged me to see Goodfellas, including my mom twice, went to see it in theaters. I was wrong. I should have seen it in theaters. And Jacob's Ladder, I should have seen it. But all of those movies, caught up with them all, eventually saw them all, and appreciate them all for different reasons. Completely different kinds of movies. A crime saga, a horror movie, family comedy set during Christmas. Now, if you ask me the question, what are my favorite Christmas movies? Die Hard and Lethal Weapon are on the list. Especially Die Hard. Even though Bruce himself says it's not a Christmas movie. I'm sorry. Don't trust the artist, trust the art. Learn that one at NYU. Alfred Hitchcock says, well, I wasn't really trying to do this. If you see it, your opinion, your takeaway is just as valid as anyone else's. Home Alone is quite obviously a Christmas movie, no doubt. But I will go Home Alone, A Christmas Story, which I absolutely love, Die Hard, Home Alone. You want to go Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone? That's kind of a Christmas movie. But yeah, we'll go with that. Those will be my 5. I really like Elf, but I you know what? You could put Elf in 5th because that's more of a standard Christmas movie than the Harry Potter series. There's a lot of debate on the internet about whether or not the Harry Potter certainly the first Harry Potter should be considered a Christmas movie. I watched it and I didn't even realize that it was Christmas time. And I just, poof, right over my head. And Lethal Weapon, the original, did not come out during Christmas time, and neither did Die Hard. I would say Die Hard is more of a Christmas movie because the fact it's literally set Christmas Eve, whereas Lethal Weapon has moments on Christmas Eve. And hey, Gary Busey, right? We love him. What a character. I met him once. What day is it? Machine gun to the TV said, it's goddamn Christmas. But Home Alone, directed by Chris Columbus, produced by John Hughes, starring Macaulay Culkin, Catherine O'Hara, John Hurd, Joe Pesci, Daniel Stern, and in a cameo, the magnificent John Candy. Home Alone released on this day, 1990. This has been episode 359 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Saturday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,